Greetings.
Hello.
Salutations.
Welcome to the third episode of the Mathom House podcast.
I am Mark and Mitchell at the same time.
I think you have said that the two previous times.
Yeah, that's how we do our intro.
Oh,
buddy.
we do? Oh, okay.
Yeah. We've actually never talked about how we do our intro. We just kind of do it.
That actually sounds exactly how your line of thinking goes.
No, that's exactly how my line of thinking goes. If anybody listening to this knows me, they know I don't think. I do.
You just leap.
I just leap. I'm a leaper. That's how I do. So we got some interesting topics for y'all today. What are we talking about, Mark?
Well, today we are talking about... See, I won't remember the name, but it's Japanese wrestling.
New Japan Pro Wrestling.
There we go.
More specifically, the man, the myth, the legend, Kenny Omega. Ooh.
Oh.
Some people may know him as the Cleaner.
Why is he the cleaner? Is he bald?
No, he's got like a perm.
Oh, wait, I know he isn't bald. He has a perm.
Yeah, you saw.
I saw him a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so we'll talk about that.
And then our second topic is going to be myths and legends surrounding Egyptian pyramids.
Which is very exciting. But before we get to that, we got some boring stuff for you. Not boring if you're interested in it. If you're listening to us, you're probably on YouTube right now. There is a red button that says subscribe. Click on it. You'll get notified every time we make a video. Whenever we get to it. Hit us up on Facebook, Mathom House Podcast at facebook.com. Send us an email. Tell us you love us. Tell us you hate us. Tell us what you want us to talk about. We'll take suggestions.
And actually, that's a good point, because the myths regarding Egyptian pyramids topic was suggested by friend of the show, Stephanie.
Yeah, so if you want us to talk about something you think we'd have fun listening to us babble, shoot us an email, mathomhousepod@gmail.com. Shoot us a Facebook message. Say, hey, talk about this. And we will say, yes, we will, or no, we won't, depending on the topic. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know.
You don't know a lot of things, but that's okay.
Yeah. Facepalm. All right. Do you have anything else you want to tell the good people before we get this rolling?
No, but speaking of rolling, we will roll the dice to determine who talks first, and off I go. Okay, we rolled a odd number, so that means that Mitchell's topic goes first because he is odd.
I hate you, Mark.
No, you don't.
So we're talking about New Japan Professional Wrestling. Very exciting. New Japan Pro Wrestling started 1972.
That's a long time ago.
A very long time ago. They're their second biggest wrestling company in the world after the World Wrestling Entertainment.
So they're Pepsi to WWE's Coke.
Yes. They're doing some pretty crazy stuff over there. They've been getting a lot of notoriety here the past year. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about, more specifically, Kenny Omega, their top guy, quote unquote. He's basicely the Japanese John Cena.
Okay.
Without the movies.
Well, but wait a minute. He's not Japanese.
Yeah, but I was about to say, he's like
Canadian or something, isn't he?
Yeah, so he is like the New Japan's version of John Cena. He is not Japanese. Actually, Canadian. Started in Canada. He actually worked for WWE at one point.
Really?
Yeah, he started their developmental program in 2006.
Now I'm picturing like people with lab coats like assembling him.
Well, he did dress up like the Terminator at last year's Wrestle Kingdom, so.
Oh, okay. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, he's like not too far off.
Wait, which Terminator?
The second Terminator.
So like Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, Arnold
Terminator.
Schwarzenegger.
Okay.
Like the good Terminator.
Right.
So I started in WWE.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't get along with the coaches.
Mm-hmm.
He got fired from WWE.
Oh.
Look where he is now.
Okay. So basically, in sports ball analogy, he got booted off a team, went to a different team, and then started doing very well at that team.
Yeah, so he started wrestling for a little company based out of Reseda, California called Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Really popular company. They only do it in a VFW hall, so maybe 200 people get to go up. You have to buy tickets 6 months in advance or else you're not going.
Holy.
I know. Tickets out in like 10 minutes.
Wow.
So that's where he got a lot of his notoriety to start with. Then he made his pilgrimage over to the great land of Japan. and started wrestling for DDT Wrestling Company. Had a lot of good matches there.
DDT sounds like a chemical that kills birds.
It's also a wrestling move where
Okay.
you put the guy, you like loop your arm around his head, so his like head's on your back, then you fall backwards to drop his head on the mat.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So he had some good matches there. He wrestled a blow up doll there at one point. He wrestled.
Wait. I'm raising my hand.
Yes, you are, Mark.
Okay, so was it like a American blow-up doll?
Yes, it was.
Or was it one of those Japanese comfort pillow things?
No, it was like a legit like $5 blow up doll you see get thrown around at concerts and stuff. He actually lost a title to it and then won the title back from it.
What? So they put the belt on the balloon?
Yes, sir.
But
I know. He did a lot of comedy stuff like that.
okay.
Wrestled a 9-year-old girl at one point. Which actually is pretty entertaining.
See, now I'm picturing like one of those creepy little girls in a dress that you see in a lot of scary movies, and they're like, "Come play with us."
No, it was just like generic 9-year-old Japanese girl, just wearing like like 9-year-old clothes.
Okay.
Like you wouldn't know she wanted to be a pro wrestler. They had a 10-minute match. It was actually not bad.
And she challenged him?
Yeah, so Kenny Omega came to town, and he was wrestling in the same building, and all women's wrestling promotion was wrestling.
Okay.
And she just wanted to wrestle Kenny Omega, so he said, okay. So they worked a few days to try to figure out how to be safe. Disclaimer, we know wrestling is fake. I'm just throwing that out there right now.
Gas.
I'm aware of it. Mark is aware of it. I don't want anyone saying, oh, it's fake. It is fake.
Right. So it's like when Iron Man fought Ironmonger or Warmonger. What was it? Ironmonger? Doesn't matter. That was choreographed too.
Yeah, it's semi-choreographed.
Okay.
But the outcome is predetermined.
So it's kind of like jazz where
Kinda, yeah.
you're playing the real song, normal song, but then you sort of improvise as you go along.
They plan the finish of the match, like the big finishing move, who's going to win and who's going to lose. And then like the crazy stuff when they like jump through tables and stuff. That's planned out.
Okay, so like in the match that we saw a little while ago, there was a point where one of them like threw one guy into a bunch of chairs, and then he backed up and ran and then dived right back into him. So like that was choreographed,
They planned
beforehand. Okay.
But like all the stuff in between, they just call on the spot.
All right.
So it's like an art form more than anything. It's not a real fight.
Right.
And I'm okay with that. So we planned the match out with the 9-year-old girl.
Mm-hmm. I would hope so.
Yes. She actually won.
Interesting.
By disqualification.
What did he do?
He picked her up. He was going to throw her out of the ring. Like he just picked her up, threw her over his head. Was going to just whip her out. The referee said, "No, you can't do that."
Well, see, it's interesting because again, in the match that I saw, the referee like didn't do anything.
Yes, which we will talk about that.
Okay,
when we get to this match.
Okay,
that's one of the cool things about New Japan is that the referees decide when to enforce what. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So Kenny Omega did some cool stuff. Made a tag team with Kota Ibushi at one point. Japanese guy.
Kota Ibushi is a Japanese guy.
Yeah. Most people from America know him from WWE's Cruiserweight tournament that they had last summer. He was one of the participants in it. Did some stuff with WWE. Decided he didn't want to do that anymore. Went back to Japan. He's been kind of quiet the past year. He deserves a year off, though.
Why does he deserve a year off?
Because he's been wrestling nonstop for like 10 years.
Oh, okay.
You just got to take a year off. Sometimes.
So, like, he's like 5 months through retirement kind of thing?
He's not 5 months from retirement. He is just trying to take care of himself.
Okay. He's getting too old for this shit kind of thing?
Yeah, kind of.
Oh, okay.
He's like your age, but...
Oh, my God.
I know. Disclaimer, Mark isn't as old as he thinks he is.
I'm older.
He's 33.
I'm so old.
You're ancient.
Right.
So, after Kenny Omega did some time in DDT, came to New Japan, I think, 2014.
Okay.
Give or take. I don't know the exact year. Joined the Bullet Club.
Yes, and this is a thing you were telling me about, that Kenny Omega and this Bullet Club, which sounds, from, again, your description, kind of like a Hogwarts house kind of a thing.
So New Japan Pro Wrestling has like these quote unquote Hogwarts houses. So they have like Bullet Club, Taguchi Japan Chaos, Suzuki-gun. The Bullet Club Hunters are a good one. Their sole purpose is to just beat up the Bullet Club.
So they're like the Slytherin to the Bullet Club's Gryffindor.
But there's only 2 guys in the Bullet Club Hunters. There's a good 13 guys in the Bullet Club.
I mean, it makes sense. There's always fewer carnivores than herbivores, so it makes sense.
The guys in the Bullet Club are great. Bullet Club Hunters are not great wrestlers, though. It's a Yoshitatsu, guy who got kicked out of WWE for not being good enough, and a guy named Mr. Ass.
But
that's his ring name, Mr. Ass.
And he chose that.
Yes.
Well, he deserves to lose then.
Yeah, so they're kind of a laughing stock.
Maybe is that the point?
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know. So, yes, he joined the Bullet Club. Now, should we go into Bullet Club history, Mark? You want to get into some Bullet Club history?
we can do that. You can do that.
Yeah, so...
Because it sounds like that this is kind of the whole reason of why you're even talking about it.
Yeah, so Bullet Club started in 2013 by a man named Prince Devitt. Wrestling fans nowadays know him as Finn Balor in the WWE. Little Irish dude.
In Japan.
In wrestling in Japan, yes. It was easier for him to start in Japan than the U.S., I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. He started with the team with that group with the man named Carl Anderson, the straight shooter, and the machine gun. So that's where Bullet Club comes from.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because Carl Anderson was the straight shooter. Oh, my cat just jumped on Mark. Just ADD moment. Good. Yeah, so it started. So Bullet Club, they started bringing like guys like the Young Bucks, like Tamatanga, and Bad Luck Fale. So it was like all the guys in Japan New Japan who weren't Japanese to start with.
Okay, so it's like the Foreign Legion of Japan wrestling.
Yeah, so they were like the cool bad guys that would come out to the ring. They wore like sunglasses and leather jackets and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like in Japan, honor is a big thing.
Right.
Like you're supposed to like shake hands, not cheat. Bullet Club cheated. They didn't shake hands.
So what this reminds me of is the Futurama episode where Bender becomes a wrestler, a robot wrestler.
Yes.
And one of the bad guy wrestlers is called the Foreigner. Yeah. That's what this reminds me of.
Yeah, so that's kind of what it was.
Okay.
So that they just exploded in Japan because it was something different.
Okay.
Because everyone was all straight-laced. It was all straight-laced Japanese guys. They were doing great stuff. There's still some awesome Japanese guys out there. But Bullet Club was just a total game changer for them. So Finn Balor left for WWE. A man named AJ Styles came in to be the leader.
He sounds stylish.
He is very stylish. His haircut kind of looks like a soccer mom haircut now. If you watched WWE in the past year, you will know what I mean. You've seen his hair.
He drives around a Toyota Previa and something.
Actually, I think he does. Yeah, he's got like 4 kids. He probably does have a minivan.
Aw, it's kind of adorable,
Yeah,
actually.
he's a cool guy. So they wrestled. That's when Kenny Omega came in under the quote-unquote AJ Styles reign of the Bullet Club. So AJ was like their heavyweight guy. So Kenny was the light heavyweight guy. So that was like sub 210 pounds, I think.
Okay.
So it started there, won the light heavyweight championship. Kenny did some cool stuff. But then, gasp. AJ Styles signed with WWE.
Traitor.
He took Carl Anderson with him.
Also traitor.
I know. It's like they wanted to make a lot more money or something. Can you believe that?
Is it like going from like the minor leagues to the major leagues?
Kind of. I don't like to use that analogy because that makes New Japan just look crappy compared to WWE. But the money is better.
Well, okay. Well, how about this? In British like television movies, they don't make nearly as much as American movies. So that's why we get a lot of good British actors over here because they can make more money making movies in Hollywood.
Yeah, and then AJ
London.
and like Carl Anderson could be at home instead of having to live in Japan. Too.
I mean, yeah, I can see that.
So that left a space for someone to come in.
A void.
Kenny Omega came in. So AJ had a big match with Shinsuke Nakamura.
And who is that?
He was the Intercontinental Champion at the time.
Okay.
He's in WWE now as well, actually.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah, so that actually played into why Kenny Omega got so big. They got gutted last January. Because like every guy I'm naming is in WWE now.
So basically, this guy filled a void of a bunch of their major popular players, wrestlers left, and then he got sort of promoted in popularity and featured because
he got the big push now that AJ was out. So he delivered. So AJ came out, said his goodbyes. Kenny Omega said, gave him his finishing move, which is the one-winged angel. Knocked AJ out. The whole Bullet Club just started stomping on AJ. So that was, at the time, maybe 10 people.
Oh, wow.
Just a beat.
That sounds a little unfair.
It was a beatdown. It was just an old-school baseball bats, bicycle chains beatdown. Those weren't there this time, actually.
Okay, I was going to say.
This is an ECW. They didn't do that in Japan.
Okay.
So that happened last January. That gave Kenny Omega room to just build himself up. He said, I'm not a junior heavyweight anymore. No, sir. I'm a heavyweight, which is just like a rank up. So that's like going from the minor leagues to the major leagues within New Japan.
Or like second string to first string.
Yeah. So he after that, he won the IWGP, which is International Grand Prix Wrestling. Intercontinental Championship.
And these are like different tournaments within the New Japan Wrestling?
Some they do tournaments. This was not a tournament. This was just a match.
Oh, okay.
It's actually the first ladder match New Japan did.
What's a ladder match?
So the belt is hanging from the ceiling above the ring.
Okay.
You get a ladder. You climb up the ladder, grab the belt to win. You can use the ladder as a weapon if you want to.
Oh, God. Okay.
I'll show you a ladder match sometime.
Okay.
They're actually really good when they're done right.
Huh.
So Kenny Omega beat a man named Michael Elgin. We call him Big Mike.
Is he big?
6'2".
Oh, yeah.
350.
Whoa, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's just like he's big.
He's a big guy.
He is a big guy. It's very scary in real life.
I'm assuming you've met him.
I have not met him. I watched him wrestle, though.
Oh, okay.
Scary man in real life.
I could believe it.
So Kenny Omega beat him. So he was IWGP Intercontinental Champion for a while. Then when summertime came around in Japan, every summer they do the G1 tournament, which is 32-man tournament over 17 days to determine the number one contender for the heavyweight title at the next big show in January. Kenny Omega did it. Wrestled. Guess what?
What?
He won.
Yay!
First non-Japanese person to win.
Whoa.
So he ended up losing the IC title to, I think, Tetsuya Naito right before, but it's okay. He won the briefcase for a contract at the Wrestle Kingdom show.
Wait, briefcase. So is this
It's
like
a
that
briefcase.
that show with the guy that they chose briefcases?
Yeah, so it's just a briefcase that holds the contract.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a symbolic thing.
Okay.
He carries around He carried around the briefcase for 6 months, going like, "This is mine." You have to defend it too, in between the G1 Climax and the actual Wrestle Kingdom, which is like their WrestleMania every year, but they hold it every January. So Kenny Omega fought some guys, kept his briefcase. Then January of this year, he's had a match with not Tetsuya Naito. Who's the dude? Kazuchika Okada. That guy.
Was that the one that we watched?
That was one of the ones we watched.
We watched two?
We watched one.
Okay, I was going to say.
No, so that's where this gets good. And this is where I wanted to start talking about, but y'all needed 18 minutes worth of backstory to understand what happened.
Well, actually, I think we need a little more backstory.
Okay.
So what you've been telling me earlier, and so I don't know anything about any of this stuff.
Yes.
And I remember a couple months ago you seeing a shirt that said Bullet Club on it, and it had this like design on it.
Yes.
And then I started seeing other people wear that, and then I wandered into a Hot Topic a few months ago.
That's actually just recent. Yeah.
And I saw a bunch of those. So what does that mean for our main topic of our guy plus New Japan Wrestling?
Well, there's these guys called the Young Bucks, Nick and Matt Jackson. They're the best tag team in the world. They're very, very, very good businessmen. They made the new T-shirt, that Bullet Club T-shirt design. They made it. they sold it on their own website and prowrestlingtees.com. Not a plug. But if you ever need a t-shirt, they are a really good t-shirt company if you ever want a wrestling shirt. So I'm not getting paid to say that. I just like them.
Okay, that's fair enough.
They sold a lot of t-shirts on there.
Okay.
So that last WrestleMania, there was more Bullet Club shirts than there was WWE shirts. So
Ouch.
Hot Topic went to WWE saying, "Hey, we want to sell these shirts." WWE said, "That's not us."
Ooh.
So they were like, but they wouldn't tell them who it was. The Young Bucks heard about it. They started pushing all their merch designs into Hot Topic. So they did like a little trial run, and if they sold well, they'd keep stocking them. That was over the summer.
Okay.
Now, that shirt is the best. Their Bullet Club shirt is the best-selling shirt Hot Topic has ever had.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's just how big Japanese wrestling is getting.
So what it sounds like is that Kenny Omega and the Bullet Club are kind of like New Japan wrestlings. They're like trying to break into the American market more so. And so this is like the point of their spear, so to speak.
Yeah, so between Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada's best matches, the Young Bucks killing it with their wrestling, their YouTube channel and merch designs, and then getting that Hot Topic deal. It's just exploded the past maybe 5 months.
Okay.
Like they've been big before, but they have just gone way, way up.
Okay. All right. Well, back to the match.
So
I just thought that was important to talk about.
It is, yeah. So they're becoming like a cultural thing now. Like they're almost what's the word I'm looking for? Like proceeding? I don't know. Advancing. I can't remember the word I'm looking for.
That's okay.
Transcending.
Ooh.
They're transcending like wrestling.
I'm proud of you. That's a bigger word than I thought you would have thought.
That's the word I was looking for.
Okay, nice.
Well, because like people will like go to Hot Topic, see the cool shirt with the skull and like the gun crossbones. They'll be like, "That's a dope shirt." They get it, then they look it up. They're like, "Oh, wrestling. That's cool."
Well, and like even in the match that we watched, I would say like a third of the people in the audience had a shirt like that.
Yeah, so they're cool because like you can just get the Bullet Club one, or you can get it centered on each wrestler.
Okay.
Like I have one from Marty Scurll, the villain. So it says Villain Club, and instead of the skull, it's got like his witch doctor mask he wears out to the ring.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you've seen that shirt before.
Okay. Is it sort of like from The Princess and the Frog?
No.
Oh, I like that movie.
I've never seen it.
Oh, it's good. Anyway.
Mitchell and Mark talk about Disney movies.
I mean, we could, but anyway.
No, we're talking about wrestling today. We're men. Yeah, so in January, that's when the big showdown between Okada and Omega happened.
So this was in 2017, January.
Yes, January 4th, 2017 at the Tokyo Dome. Wrestle Kingdom, I think 11 that one was.
Ooh.
Yeah, so big show. Biggest show of the year. That took the briefcase. Had the first of 3 timeless matches.
Aw, timeless. It sounds so cute.
Yes. So they wrestled for about 45 minutes, I think that match went, which is insane to think about.
What is the normal time length?
WWE goes for maybe 7 minutes on their just regular TV programming. Ring of Honor, one of the other small companies, goes maybe 15.
Okay.
You don't usually see more than 20.
Okay, wow. Okay.
Because, they're people.
Right. And they're running around and picking people up and
putting them down.
Well, I mean, it's essentially like in an American football game. Yeah, the game is an hour, but there's a lot of breaks.
Yeah.
It's like the action only lasts like maybe a minute or two at a time. Yeah, so like that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, like they'll when they're get hurt, they'll sell the moves. Like they'll use that to take a break. They will use a lot of submission holds to take a break. But that was a 45-minute match that was almost nonstop.
Ugh.
I know. It just made me tired watching it. That was, at the time in January, is considered the best wrestling match of all time. Dave Meltzer, the biggest wrestling journalist, gave it 6 out of his 5-star system.
Whoa. He went up to 11.
He went up to 6 out of 5. But Kenny Omega lost, unfortunately.
Aww.
Did not win the title. That actually says so. Kenny was off New Japan for a little bit, took a break, decided to reevaluate his career, almost went to WWE again, actually. Yeah, Vince McMahon and Triple H really wanted him. He said, hell no.
I mean, maybe he wanted to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond and build his career that way.
See, honestly, I think he debuted as like a top guy, though.
Okay.
So that's what AJ Styles did, and so and he's arguably bigger now than AJ was in Japan.
All right.
So you don't understand it? It's okay.
I think I'm picking it up.
You're picking it up, yeah. So Kenny Omega decided to stay in Japan for another year and did some stuff. Not really anything super notable until June or May or June. I think it's April, actually. Whenever New Japan's Dominion show is. I think it was April. I can't remember. He and Okada had a rematch.
Mm-hmm.
It went for an hour.
Whoa.
To a draw.
Oh.
Because title matches have an hour time limit.
They're building the drama.
Yeah, they built it up. So New Japan Wrestling Rules. That's a good time to talk about that. Smooth transition right there. So the only way to win is pinfall, submission, make him tap out. You can make him count. You can get disqualified. Or if you throw him out of the ring for 20 seconds.
Okay.
The person outside the ring loses.
Makes sense.
But in title matches like that, the referees are a little loosey-goosey with some of their rules.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Like, we watched the third match of the trilogy. Me and Mark did a few weeks ago. And half the match was outside the ring.
I was going to say.
The referee was like, you don't want to stop a title match if you don't have to.
Okay.
That's something cool that non-WWE companies do. Like, if it's a title match and there's stakes on the line, a chair shot, they will usually let it slide.
Because they're there for the entertainment.
Yeah, like the first match Kenny Omega and Okada had, Kenny went through two tables, and which technically is against the rules, but the match didn't stop.
Hopefully they were made out of balsa wood.
No, they were just like little flimsy tables.
Okay.
They're literally maybe a foot wide.
Oh, okay. Like,
yeah, these bitchy tables in Japan.
I've never heard a table being described that way.
Well, like in America, we use like those long like wooden tables.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm picturing.
Yeah, like they're easy to go through. I have a wrestler friend that comes into the library I work at. He said they're easy to break, so you just go through them. He says,
just like being thrown into a table, no big deal.
Yeah, he said that actually don't hurt as bad as like landing on the floor.
Oh, okay.
So it's like he says they're like a cushion when you're like taking a big move.
Okay, I'll take his word for it, I guess.
Yeah, so we just use like those long poker tables. In Japan, they use little bitchy tables, but it's still good. So Kenny Omega lost. Lost again.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know what to do with himself.
Mm-hmm.
So before the 2017 G1 Climax, they had a tournament to unveil the New Japan Pro Wrestling United States champion.
Oh, and who competed for that?
16 guys from both Ring of Honor and New Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So Ring of Honor and New Japan have like a working relationship together where they like they just share wrestlers and stuff and share stories.
So Ring of Honor is like a smaller wrestling company in the U.S.
Yeah, they're probably number 2 in the U.S. right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so like they're based out of Pennsylvania. They do some small shows. I went to one over the spring. It was maybe, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people. 1,000 people. So they'll do 1,000 people. Good sized crowds. They're not nearly as big as WWE though. It happens. That's why they work with Japan. They get a lot of the Japanese guys over here. A lot of their guys go over to Japan. Just more exposure for everybody.
Okay.
It's a win. It's like a win-win kind of thing.
Like cross-promotional.
Yeah, so it's really cool actually. When I went and saw Ring of Honor, it was like a co-branded Ring of Honor New Japan show. So I got to see guys like Hiroshi Tanahashi and Tetsuya Naito. I wouldn't have gotten to see them wrestle in Dearborn, Michigan ever. But Ring of Honor brought them over. It was pretty cool. So Kenny Omega won the tournament, won the U.S. title, Canadian man.
Won the U.S. title. For a Japan wrestling company.
I don't get it, but I go with it.
Okay.
That's the first big title Kenny won in Japan. Well, he won the like heavyweight title. That's a cool one. Intercontinental title is like the second to the best, but they're positioning the U.S. title to be like up there with the world heavyweight title. Since they're breaking into U.S., they wanted to have a title that they just only be defended here.
Right, and they can promote it that way. That makes sense.
Yeah, so like it gets defended at every Ring of Honor show Kenny's at. So cool stuff. So Kenny went into the G1 tournament with the U.S. title. Went through the tournament, got to the finals. The match we watched was a semifinal match
Oh.
between Omega and Okada. Kazuchika Okada versus Omega 3. It was the worst rated of the matches.
Wait, what was the 3 part?
It's just the third one.
Oh, okay.
But it was really good. That's the one I showed Mark the other week. Mm-hmm. What do you think of it, Mark?
Again, like it was a little different from what I was expecting. And again, I've maybe watched a total of maybe 5 minutes of WWE wrestling over my life.
Yeah.
So, but this looked a lot more brutal than American wrestling. And also there was a lot less, I don't know what you call it, but story or acting in it. Mm-hmm. It was much more just about the match.
Yeah. So Japan's cool. They treat it like they present it like an MMA fight kind of.
Yeah.
So like they have press conferences. That's where they set the story up. Then they make it look as real as possible. It's called Japanese strong style, how hard they hit and stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of noisy, actually.
Yeah, like they're just like a lot of open hand palms slapping things to make loud noise.
That just sounds bad.
Tobias, you okay?
Exactly.
So did you enjoy the match?
Yeah, I mean, again, I was really surprised at just how brutal it looked, and and like again, like that point where the guy throws Kenny into basically the stands, and then he goes all the way at the back of the floor area, and then he just runs at him, and you think he's gonna
leaps over the barricade.
Yeah, I know. It looked like he was gonna do something. Like I would have guessed something less suicidal looking, but he just like dived right.
He did.
Jeez.
He did. It was great. But what were you expecting from it?
I don't know. I guess I was expecting more of a Japanese version of WWE, I suppose.
Yeah, so it's cool. Japan goes a little harder because WWE does 5 or 6 shows a week for the wrestlers. Mm-hmm. New Japan guys, they do like a week on, a week off, depending on the schedule. They don't wrestle every day. So their bodies, they can do more without having to worry about getting hurt as much because they're not doing it every day. So they can get like conditioned for it and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you would have to be.
Yeah, so it was a good match. Kenny Omega finally beat Okada in that match.
Dun, dun, dun.
That was like the whole big story in the match. It was, instead of an hour time limit, they only had half an hour to get it done.
So time was their enemy.
Yeah, so it was a really fast-paced match. The other ones were a little more lethargic, just going for it, just taking their time. This one, they were just wailing on each other pretty much the whole time.
Well, yeah, and I'd say the first third or half, it looked like the other guy was beating on Omega, and then he turned it around.
Yeah, so they had a really good like back and forth action. It wasn't just a one-sided match. It was good. The big story was that Kenny Omega never hit his finisher on Okada. That's why he never won. So the last maybe 5 minutes of the match was just Kenny trying to get the one-winged angel on Okada. He finally got it. He got his pinfall with like 2 minutes left in the time limit. So he ended up going on to the finals of the G1. Fought Tetsuya Naito. He lost.
Oh.
Which, whatever. He's got the U.S. title. It's all good. So,
and he defeated the guy that he couldn't beat before. So.
Yeah, so we got closure on the whole Omega Okada thing.
For now.
Yes. I don't see that happening again.
Really? Why not?
I honestly don't. I'm going to tell you why not.
Okay.
Right now. So Kenny Omega defended his title a few times afterwards. A few weeks ago, he fought Trent Beretta, otherwise known as Trent with a question mark at the end. So every time...
Wait, why does he have a question mark at the end?
Because he's a funny dude.
Oh, okay.
When at Ring of Honor, when I saw him, he yelled, "Chant something!" So we all looked at each other and we all started yelling, "Something, something, something!" And he just looked, he's like, "I don't know what I expected." Yeah, Trent Beretta always seems like a cool guy when he's wrestling.
All right.
So he beat Beretta. Omega said, "Nobody can beat me. I am the best. Nobody. Who's going to beat me now?" Room goes dark. Chris Jericho from WWE comes on. Says, "You think you're the best of all time? No, I am. I'm going to beat you, bitch."
Did he actually say that?
Yeah, he did say bitch.
Oh, okay.
That's the part that got to me. That was surprising for a few reasons. Chris Jericho has been in WWE, only them, since 1998 or 99.
Wow. Okay.
He got his start in Japan, though.
Oh.
And so he started in Canada, then went from Mexico to Japan. So he's a veteran from New Japan from the 90s.
So he's like coming home for one last fight.
Yeah, because Jericho was talking about retiring this year, too. Because he's got a metal band on the side. He's an author. He's written 4 books. He does a very popular podcast.
He's a man of letters.
He is. Actually, his podcast, Talk is Jericho. If anybody's into wrestling, I highly recommended it. Super interesting dude. So, yeah, it was just amazing to see him show up on a New Japan show when he's allegedly contracted by WWE. So they're going to wrestle for the U.S. title at the Tokyo Dome January 4th. It's going to be very good. I'm super excited.
So you're going to like take the night off and make a big deal of watching and everything?
Well, it's probably going to show about... The show's probably start at 2 in the morning.
Oh, God. Okay.
Well, actually, last year's Wrestle Kingdom I watched, I started it about 4 in the morning, slept maybe 2 hours, went to do an 8:30 shift at work the next day, kept up with it while I was working. So that might end up happening again. I might just take the day after off.
Well, that's probably for the best.
We'll see. It's going to be a good match. We are going to talk about it
Okay.
in January. We're going to do something like we just did, but with Chris Jericho's career instead.
And again, as someone who knows zero about American wrestling, I actually kind of recognize that guy. I think I've seen him before in something. Has he been in TV or movies or anything? Because he looks very familiar.
He was on Dancing with the Stars.
Okay, I didn't watch that, but I see why I would see him in random things.
Like, if you flipped through the TV on a Monday or on a Monday night in the past maybe 15 years, you've probably seen him on TV.
Okay.
At some point, he's been on Dancing with the Stars. You've probably seen his books in the stores.
I've probably seen him at a Comic-Con signing something.
Yeah,
before,
you probably have.
so,
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like one of the biggest names in wrestling.
All right.
I would argue that he is the best wrestler in history.
Okay.
So that's going to be good. Do you have any other words to say about that?
Yeah. Well, okay. For people who are interested who already like WWE wrestling, let's say, what about New Japan Wrestling and about Kenny Omega would you try to convince them to watch that?
The matches are insane. That's what sold me on it.
Okay.
I've been watching WWE off and on since 2005.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up on it. I loved Stone Cold. The Rock is great. John Cena back in the day was cool. Triple H. All those guys. Part of my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So I started watching WWE really heavily again last summer. It was good, really good. But then I got wind of this whole Bullet Club thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then I looked into it, watched some Young Bucks matches, watched some Kenny Omega stuff. Just it blows me away what they do. Like, they're so athletic. They don't take their time, which is a good and bad. Sometimes they don't sell moves when they should.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, it's just a more entertaining product in my mind.
Okay.
It's not as cheesy as wrestling. Like, no one's like faking their deaths in limos.
Wait, what?
Yeah, Vince McMahon faked his own death in a limo for his storyline once.
Okay.
So WWE the wrestling's better now than it's ever been.
Uh-huh.
But it still feels like a soap opera.
All right.
They don't plan stories out very well. They just go like week by week. New Japan, they just have a whole arc of what they're gonna do the next year.
Okay.
So if you want to watch it, they have some free videos on YouTube. You can find them on the internet if you want to. Or if you want everything New Japan has, they have a subscription service called New Japan World. It's 999 yen. It's about $7.
I was gonna say that's got to be like what, $10?
It's
or
about
less?
it's about $7 a month.
Okay.
It is actually worth it.
All right. And I'm assuming you can access that through like PSN network, Xbox.
It's actually just on the computer right now.
Oh, just on PC.
It's just on the web
Okay.
browser because they only have maybe 10,000 subscribers here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like the WWE subscription where you can get it on everything.
Yeah.
But if you want some good wrestling, I usually only keep it during January and then June so I can get Wrestle Kingdom, and then so I can get the what do you call it, G1 Classic.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just find clips and stuff on YouTube otherwise. But
Okay.
If anyone just wants good wrestling, look into it.
You should like link a clip on our Facebook page just to give people a little teaser.
Yeah, I'll link a highlight of one of the Omega Okada matches. Yeah, I'll post that in there. I think the second one, because that was my favorite. That one got like 6 3/4 stars.
It went to 11 again.
It went over 11. So that was New Japan Pro Wrestling and Kenny Omega. You'll hear about this in January. We'll be right back after the short message from our sponsor, which isn't actually a sponsor at all.
Which is Mitchell's Music.
It's just a song. Bye. And we're back.
We're back.
Did you miss us?
Probably not.
We missed you.
Eh.
It was a whole 15 seconds. It was about 20 minutes for us, but about 15 seconds for you.
I mean, you had to get coffee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Coffee makes the world go round.
Gravity does.
But this coffee tastes like chocolate.
Okay, that actually does sound kind of good.
It's very good. What's our next topic, Mark?
Okay, our topic, and again, this is a listener requested topic, which is myths surrounding Egyptian pyramids and monuments, and that essentially means the pyramids and the Sphinx.
So I literally know nothing about this.
See, I think you do.
Okay, well...
I think it's one of those things that if you really stop and think about it, you've heard some of these myths before.
Okay.
Or legends or theories or whatever you want to talk about it. You know, like I'll just put you on the spot right now.
Put me on blast.
Wait, what?
Put me on blast.
Oh, yeah. So, like, what is a myth or legend about the pyramids that you have heard?
Aliens.
Yep, that's one.
I'm pretty sure it was aliens.
Okay, and what is there another one that you can think of off the top of your head? I bet there is.
Something in Transformers, right?
Oh, God, I forgot about that. Why did you make me think of Transformers 2?
Why would I make you think about any Transformers
Well,
movie?
yeah, I guess so.
Yikes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, anyway, like there's a lot of ones that you've probably heard of. Like you may have heard about that, like the Sphinx, for instance, got his nose shot off by Napoleon.
I've never heard of
Really?
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I know that aliens made the pyramids. That's about it.
Yeah. Okay. And or you may have heard that the Freemasons are somehow involved with the pyramids.
I actually don't know that much about the Freemasons.
Okay.
I'm more of an Illuminati kind of person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, whatever your secret society that you believe is controlling the world,
The Illuminati.
probably has some sort of connection with the pyramids and people's heads.
Okay.
You may have heard that that slaves built the pyramids.
I heard that, but I heard that was not true.
Right. And you also may have heard that the Jews built the pyramids.
I've also heard that was not true.
That is also true because it's not true. You know what I mean?
It's also true because
Right.
Do you see the contradiction in that?
Right.
Okay.
And then another one that comes up a lot, it's kind of like an older one. You don't hear as much anymore, but that the pyramids were used for grain storage.
Were they used for grain storage?
No.
Gasp.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, so first I think what we'll do is we'll go through some of these here, and then I'll go through some random points.
Take me away.
But before we start that, I want to read a little quote. And this guy is called William of Ockham.
Is he from Ockham?
Yes.
If you put another R in there, he's from Arkham.
It's with an O, not an A.
Oh, shit.
And he was a guy, an Englishman from the Middle Ages. And I'm guessing you've heard of him, even if you didn't know you have heard of him. And he is famous for saying, entities are not to be multiplied without necessity.
Should I have heard that before?
Well, you've heard it paraphrased
Have I?
or simplified. It's often called Occam's razor. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay. Occam's razor basically says...
Okay.
Wait.
Another wrestling thing. There's these two guys called the Authors of Pain.
Uh-huh.
Occam and Razor.
Oh, okay.
So that's where I know it from
Okay.
WWE NXT.
All right. Good tangent there. But Occam's razor basically states, or can be simplified as, don't look for complications where you don't need to. That's essentially what it means.
That's words of wisdom right there.
So kind of like a real world example of this would be, kid comes up to the teacher and says, teacher, I don't have my homework done today because my grandmother died, and then my dog ate my homework, and then blah, 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 and then I did it again, and then it flew out the window of the car on my way here, right?
That escalated very quickly.
Right. But what's the most likely explanation? The kid forgot to do his homework, right?
Sure.
Right. So now, while all those things that kid said could potentially have happened, right, it's far more likely the simplest explanation is probably the correct one, right? Or the one that requires the least amount of unlikely variables to occur, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's not always going to be the case, but it's sort of a good test to test your theory.
Yeah, like what if the kid's grandma did die, and then the dog ate the homework, and then while he's mourning over his dead grandma, he gets the homework done, and then he loses it all. This kid's having a shitty day. We gotta be nice to him.
True, but again, the most likely explanation is that the kid just forgot to do the homework,
which is 9 times out of 10,
right? Or 9 million times out of 9 million. But yeah, you know, like that's usually the best way to go through it. And so keep that in mind when we talk about some of these things.
Okay.
So I guess we're going to start with a real simple one, and that is that the Jewish people built the pyramids. Now, there's a couple problems with this. Number one, what do you mean by when you say the pyramids? Now, most people think you're talking about the Egyptian pyramids, and that is what we're talking about. But actually, the pyramids in ancient Egypt were built in several phases. So there were ones built in what is called the Old Kingdom. So we're talking about anywhere between 4,000 to 4,600 years ago.
Okay.
So a very long time ago.
It's older than you.
It's very much older than me. But then that's like the main pyramid building age, right? Mm-hmm. But then in sporadic chunks throughout the rest of ancient Egyptian history, which again was over the next more than 2,000 years, basically other rulers came by and said, hey, remember all those cool things that those old cool pharaohs did? I want to do that too. Think of it almost like a nostalgia trip, or trying to, like, sometimes what would happen is foreign rulers, so non-native Egyptians, would take over Egypt, and as part of their, hey, I'm Egyptian too now, guys, I'm cool, you can follow me, is then they would start doing things like the old days. So, like, for instance, in the late period, which was only between 600 and 300 or so BC, Nubians and Sudanese people took over parts of Egypt, and they started building a lot of pyramids for their rulers and their royal families and so on. So when you're saying someone built the pyramids, you kind of have to define what you mean by that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a problem. But usually when people refer to the Egyptian pyramids, they mean the ones built during the Old Kingdom. That's the ones that everyone knows and thinks of, right?
Are there any other pyramids besides those?
Well, around the world?
Or just like the scale we're thinking of?
Well, yeah, and that's something we'll get into earlier, but other cultures have built pyramid-like structures, but for very different, well, mostly very different reasons and in different times.
Okay.
But anyway, we're going back to the question of, Jewish laborers building the pyramids. Well, again, most of the pyramids that most people are familiar with and the ones that are still around were built in the Old Kingdom. So, again, about 2700 BCE to like 2200 BCE. Well, the Exodus, so this is, the events...
Not the metal band.
Sure, not the metal van, but the events surrounding the Exodus. So from the Jewish and Christian Bible, the Exodus of, with Moses and everything, let my people go. That is estimated to have happened around 14 to 1200 BCE.
Okay.
So the building of the Great Pyramids would have been more than 1,000 years earlier than that. So that doesn't quite work, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't work. And then also we have plenty of records of native Egyptians building the pyramids, not only in meaning of they designed them and ordered them, but native Egyptians were actually the ones doing the manual labor. And over the last couple decades, they actually have discovered for lack of a better term, barracks.
Okay.
And, then they would do this with all sorts of other building projects, whether they were, aqueducts or other tomb structures or temples. If they were far away from, and they usually were, far away from like city or town centers where people would live, they would build like almost like what we would think of like a military barracks near the building site. And that's where the workers and or their families would live while working on the project. So we have these things, and we haven't found any evidence of, Jews or Canaanites or Palestinians or anything, people from the Levant, which is what that area is called, in Egypt at that time.
All right.
So that's kind of bursting the bubble of that one.
That wasn't even a good one.
No, it's not. And
that was kind of stupid.
And again, a lot of this is when you're talking about anything in history, or anything in the sciences, the record is imperfect.
Yeah.
And so
it's like you gave a telephone.
Yeah, that's part of it. And then sometimes you end up with detailed records from one point of view or from one specific time in history or about one specific subject. And then they try to extrapolate from that into other things.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, the Torah and the Exodus and all that, speak of events relating to Jewish history of that time. And they refer to Egypt and they refer to, the Jewish people at the time being, like a slave or labor class, right? Mm-hmm. So they took that one nugget of information and then extrapolated that to they built the pyramids. Well, no. Yeah.
No.
So, and that's actually how a lot of these sort of myths and legends get started, is that they have very incomplete information and they take that to an extreme or to be more important than it really is, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's one of them.
I didn't like that one.
No. Another one is related to this issue, and that's the grain storage thing. So,
okay, I have a problem with that to start with.
Okay, yeah,
Why
go right
would
ahead.
we build? How tall is the pyramid? Like, however tall they are. I don't even.
Let me look it up. So, the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is basically whenever you see a picture of the pyramids, it's always those three really big ones.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the tallest one there, it was the tallest man-made structure for 3,800 years.
Why would we build the tallest structure ever made to hold grain?
Well, if you kind of think about it,
That
grain is the most important thing in most people's lives.
Yes.
Whatever your staple crop is. If you're in East Asia, it's rice. If you are in most of the rest of Eurasia, it's a type of grain. And if you were in the New World, it was corn or potatoes. And now it's all four of those things mixed together. But that's the most important thing in your life, right? So you're going to put a lot of effort into it.
But it took thousands of years to build a big grain holder.
Well, yeah. I mean, part of it is...
I just don't buy that.
Right, I know. And it doesn't make any sense.
I understand the importance of grain and all that. But I also, if I was a farmer, let's say, and I really needed to hold some grain, I wouldn't take thousands of years to make a grain holder. There's much better ways to make grain holders.
Well, yeah, and part of it is we'll talk about why people have thought that.
Because people are stupid.
Well, that's part of it. One thing was, for about 2,000 years, no one could read hieroglyphics or read other forms of ancient Egyptian. So there was long periods of time where there was all this, mysterious writing around, all these structures that were very impressive, and people didn't have the ability to find out, right? Now, of course, we've been able to read ancient Egyptian language.
Go humans.
Yeah, I mean, go the French and the British.
Shout out to the French.
For about, like a century and a half or more. Almost 200 years.
It's a lot of years.
Yeah, not bad now. So that's part of it. The other thing was, again, taking that little bit of information and going farther. So you may have heard of the Joseph story, also from the Hebrew and Christian Bible.
Nope.
Okay, well, if you heard the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
I know that it exists.
Okay. Well, in the Joseph story...
Joey.
Yes, Joey. Joseph's brothers become jealous of him, and they basically fake his death, and they sell him to an Egyptian merchant, and he becomes a slave in Egypt, and then because he's a famous dream interpreter, he becomes like an advisor to the pharaoh. And part of his dream interpreting is that he predicts that Egypt is going to have a famine. No, sorry, I'll start over. Egypt was going to have this boom time of like where they're going to have really good crops for a couple years, and then they were going to have a famine after that. And so what Joseph advises the pharaoh to do is to haul all that excess grain for as long and as much as they can to save it for the bad times that are coming up, right?
But also, how long does it take to build a pyramid?
Well, less time than you might think. But so this is this famous story, right? Mm-hmm. So when they were looking around and people for, again, nearly 2,000 years, walking around not knowing or caring really to investigate what the pyramids were for, they saw these big structures in this place where they knew for years they had to save all this grain for the bad times. So it just sort of became this, well, we know this story. In this same place, they needed these big granaries, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where that legend came from. But of course, there's a bunch of problems with that. The number one problem is we actually have granary structures that archaeologists have discovered from ancient Egypt. So they didn't need the pyramids for that purpose?
What were the structures like? Just curiosity.
Well, most granaries are kind of look like the ones that you see today. You know, picture a silo, a tallish round structure.
Yeah, I feel like making a bunch of silos would be a lot quicker and easier than building mega grain structure.
And picture what a silo looks like today. It's a big hollow tube, right?
Yeah.
And then also think to structures before we had things like nails, and also think of Egypt where they didn't have a lot of wood, right? Mm-hmm. So if they had to either build in mud brick or stone. Well, think of a Greek temple with all those columns.
Yeah.
You know, you've seen? Mm-hmm. Well, you don't get a lot of floor space in ancient structures before the Romans designed that arch, which then, because if the arch, distributes the weight better of the big roof, so then you can have a big building that has a lot of room in it, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, the pyramids are mostly not empty.
Yeah, aren't they like solid?
They're mostly solid, right?
Yeah.
And so they couldn't build large structures that were hollow. So the granaries were relatively small. I don't remember off the top of my head how small they were.
Then why would they build something that's mostly solid to store things?
Exactly. It's kind of dumb.
There's just so many holes in this.
Yeah. It's
Illuminati confirmed.
Yeah, and it's kind of dumb. And we've actually, this is the case around the world, but in ancient Egypt, if you find the granary, so the bread maker, the people that made bread, you also find the beer maker because they use similar things. So they would sort of right next to each other.
All that stuff.
Exactly. So they would be right next to each other. So we have lots of small granaries all throughout ancient Egypt that have been found by archaeologists. So we don't need the pyramids to be granaries.
Ain't nobody be needing the pyramids or granaries.
Exactly. And then the other thing is granaries are about life, right?
Yeah.
They're about holding food so that you don't die during the winter months or just storing your food for the next day.
We like being alive.
We do. But the pyramids were all about death or the afterlife. So we know what they were for, and they were for holding the pharaoh's dead body.
Yeah, that's
or their family members.
Yeah, that's what I thought the purpose was for. So
yeah, so we know that.
Why are they thinking we're keeping grain in there? We're finding mummies in there.
Yeah.
Unless like the mummies add a nice notes of flavor, to the grain. Like notes of dead guy.
Yeah. It's like the wine. You know, they stick your nose in and you can smell the different things. Yeah.
Or like this cup of coffee, just aerate it, inhale the aroma, enjoy it. I get notes of dead body. I get notes of royalty from this grain.
Yeah, exactly. So a third common thing is that the pyramid has a magical power, or the symbolism of the shape is all important. And while the pyramid's structure and the size and the shape has some potential meaning, it's actually much more to do with architecture and with looking impressive. And
it looks damn impressive.
Yeah, and just like with anything, sometimes things get a mystique with them, not because they have a mystique, but because they are impressive or because they're rare or hard to do, right? Like a lot of expensive food or clothing or whatever you can think of isn't actually better than the product that you use. Like think of like actual silverware, right? Those are, you have to wash them differently. They're harder to maintain than just normal stainless steel, forks and knives.
I literally just use plastic forks today.
Well, okay. Yeah. But the point is they have a bigger prestige, not because they're better, but because they're more expensive and difficult.
Yeah. Like I'll honestly just, that might just be the terrible environment person in me, but I love the convenience of plasticware.
Right.
It's flimsy, but for a bowl of cereal, I don't even eat cereal, but for a bowl of cereal, darn good. That's Mitchell's tangent for today.
But anyway, so the idea that, people will say, oh, if you put a cut under a pyramid shape, it'll heal faster. Well, that's a bunch of...
That happens.
No.
Yes.
No.
Then how come my wounds heal faster when I put them on top of dollar bills?
Because that money is paying for a doctor, which is helping you.
There you go.
There we go.
Hey-o.
But if the pyramids had any significance, like the actual shape to ancient Egyptians, it represented the ancient mound. So like many ancient peoples, the part of their creation myth was a island or a piece of land rising out of the ocean. This kind of makes sense, right? We live on land, ocean surrounds the land. It just sort of makes sense. And what does a pyramid look like? It kind of looks like a big island or a big mound or a mountain that's man-made, right?
I was going to say triangle.
Well, yeah, it also looks like that. And then the other thing is, again, like most peoples, the Egyptians were sun worshippers. And a pyramid kind of either points towards the sky, towards the sun, or you could also view it as like a sun ray coming from the top, the point, coming down to the earth. And, like many ancient rulers, the pharaoh often associated himself, or in some rare cases herself, with the sun. So that makes some sense too.
Shine, shine, superstar.
So in a way, it's just a shape, primarily. But the architectural reason of why you would build a pyramid instead of another shape is, again, you don't have... the Egyptians didn't have the ability to build a large structure that could support itself without having lots of interlocking parts, right? I mean, think of when we think of buildings, we think of frame structures, whether that's your house or whether picture like a big office building go up. It's built in like little rectangular squares that are attached to each other, and then the outer skin covers it, right? But the structure is within the supports. Well, that's not how you build in stone, and especially before the Romans designed that archway. Picture it almost like building with Legos. You build the Lego, and then you overlap part of the Lego on top of it, and you end up with like a stair structure.
Yeah.
Right? Well, what does a pyramid look like? It looks like a bunch of interlocking rectangles, like Legos, in a stair structure. So in order to build something that was very large and got very tall, you were kind of encouraged to build a pyramid shape.
Okay.
Because you couldn't just build it vertically up really that easily.
Yeah.
And you couldn't, have a lot of big empty space in it. So again, it's just a convenient
we didn't get
shape.
to doing that until the past 100 years. So
Yeah. And this is actually another reason why it's not of a huge symbolic significance is multiple peoples throughout the world, different cultures have discovered the, I don't want to say easiness because it was extremely difficult, but the practicality of building very large structure in a pyramid shape. So a culture that slightly predated, but then also continued through most of ancient Egypt history were the Sumerians or the Mesopotamians. So this would be like modern day Iraq.
Yeah.
And they built structures called ziggurats. And they kind of looked a lot like a pyramid, but they weren't pointy. So picture like a bunch of stairs going up where the base, the next layer gets smaller and smaller and smaller until you get to a platform up at the top, right? Well, and like any big monumental structure, it almost always had a religious significance. So you'd put like the little temple on the top, or you'd do ceremonies from the top, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then the Aztecs and the Mayans did the same thing. In a way, that's even a better explanation or better comparison, because the Aztecs and the Mayans didn't build their pyramids until almost 2,000 years later. And on the other side of the world, where there was little to no contact between those two cultures.
Yeah, there's no way they would have known that there was structures out there.
And they are built a little differently. And again, they're more of that stair structure rather than the smooth structure that most Egyptian pyramids are built. But again, they were built as religious structures of where you would do ceremonies at the top or on the base or on the different steps and things like that. So they discovered that, hey, you're going to need to build a big structure out of stone. You're going to make a pyramid shape.
Yeah.
Because that's just the most practical.
That's just how we do.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So another one that we're going to talk about is Napoleon.
Oh.
Now this one is goes off to the side from the pyramid idea, and this goes to the Sphinx. A lot of people know that Napoleon invaded Egypt during the French Revolutionary Wars. And long story why, you don't need to know why he was there. But
why not?
Oh, okay, I'll tell you.
No, like, why wouldn't he be there?
Oh, why wouldn't
I mean,
he?
you can tell if you want to.
Okay.
I'm not telling you can't. I'm just saying, like, why would you be there? Why not?
Long story short, the British were the main French enemy during most of the last several hundred years, up until, the late 19th century. But anyway, Britain held control over most of India during most of this time. And so like India was a big money generator. So if you're France, your goal is to either capture your enemy's money generator or to make it harder for them to get money out of their money generator, right? Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, the thought was a lot of trade and a lot of the merchant routes from India to Europe went through Egypt, because you went up the, through the Indian Ocean, up the Red Sea, through Egypt, and that little part, where the Red Sea almost meets the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And then you go into the Mediterranean, into Europe and Britain. Makes sense.
So if you cut that off,
right,
you can't go there.
So the French thought, hey, if we invade Egypt and take it over, the British their trade is going to suffer, and they're going to be less able to attack us. So it makes a lot of sense.
Makes so much sense.
It does.
More sense than I would ever make.
Well, you rarely ever make much sense.
Damn right.
So in 1798, Napoleon and a large army sailed to Egypt, and they also took along 167 scientists and artists and historians and all sorts of other people. And this was, in many ways, the first well-organized scientific expedition in human history.
Ooh.
And so Egypt, the French's idea was, Egypt had all this mystique, well, if we're going to Egypt, let's document it. And so they brought along, what we would call like botanists and biologists They brought along linguists and artists, and because again, photography didn't exist, they had artists to paint and sketch what they saw. And basically, modern Egyptology and archaeology was based on this expedition.
Fancy.
Yeah. And so at one point, Napoleon and his army got to Giza, where the main large pyramids are and where the Sphinx is. And the story ever since was, well, the reason the Sphinx didn't have a nose is because Napoleon or his soldiers in their drunken state or whatever shot off the nose.
Wrong.
Right. It's not right.
It's left.
If Napoleon or his soldiers, and especially Napoleon himself, brought along 167 scientists in order to record and care about something, why would you just walk up to a monument and blow it up?
Because why not?
It makes no sense, right?
It really doesn't.
No, it makes zero sense. But then the other thing that is the better evidence, because one, you just sort of have a personality. If you're putting Napoleon on trial, you might say, well, why would I bring along this scientific expedition and then not care about the thing I'm studying, right?
Yeah.
But the bigger evidence is we have drawings and sketches from European merchants.
Okay, we're going to hit the pause button for just a second so my mom can come in the house. All right, we're back from our intermission. My mom came home.
With Christmas presents.
I didn't see any of them.
Good, because they were for you.
Some of them were for me, yes. So, Mark, where did we leave off? Something about European merchants.
Oh, right. So we left off about trying to explain away the why the Sphinx doesn't have its nose.
Yes, we were.
And the myth is that Napoleon or his soldiers shot it off. Well...
But why would they?
Why would they? That makes no sense, especially since they were there to study and learn about Egypt, not to destroy it. Or at least partly. So anyway, we have drawings and, like that would be in like notebooks from ship's logs or from personal diaries of European merchants that were coming up the Nile or actually down the Nile. And they drew pictures of the Sphinx and it was missing its nose. And this was decades before Napoleon and his soldiers got there.
Do we know what happened?
Well, if you make a stone statue, picture like a lot of the Greek statues, right? Or the Roman statues, the marble statues. Think of the Venus de Milo, right? What is it missing? Its arms. Right?
The arms.
Yeah, it's missing its arms.
Duh,
It
it's
looks like
obviously
it
the
looks like you
arms.
chopped off its arms. Well, any bits that are hanging off of the central structure of it are going to either, the flaws in the masonry or in the marble or just weather. They're going to wear away the smaller overhanging parts.
I mean, stone in outside is erosion.
Right. They're more likely to get damaged. They're more likely to fall off.
It happens.
Yeah. And then, something that's several thousand years old, the relatively tiny little nose part is going to fall off.
But that's not as good of a story.
It's not in that. That's the thing. The axiom is always that the winners write history. Well, that's not really true. It's the better story wins, even if it's not true. Think of like rumors that are started. It's not always what is truth. It's just what makes the best, juiciest story.
I love a good story.
And especially since in the 19th century, who controlled most of the world's newspapers and then later radio and TV, movie, it's English speakers. Well, the British don't like the French and the British didn't like Napoleon. So they're going to spread that story against their enemy, rather than the boring story of, it was just erosion.
Because that's not fun.
No, it's not fun.
It's like, how's the Grand Canyon made? Erosion.
Yeah.
Aliens. Cool.
Yeah, exactly. The more, and a better axiom is whatever the most boring explanation is most likely the truth.
Which makes me sad.
Yeah, but it's also the truth. So,
It's aliens.
which is better.
It's aliens.
Right. So another pyramid and Sphinx related legend or myth has to do with the Freemasons. And basically, if you read any book about conspiracies, they always mention the Freemasons. It's like the sun rising and setting. It's just going to be.
Yeah.
Well, the more interesting thing, so, okay, anyway, why are the Freemasons and the pyramids connected? Part of it has to do with, if you look at a American dollar bill on the back, it has a pyramid on it with a floating tops piece with an eye on it, right?
I'm pulling out a dollar bill.
Mm-hmm.
I can confirm that.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Yes, it does. I've actually never looked at that before.
Uh-huh. Yeah, see? Kind of looks kind of cool.
It does kind of
But it's also kind of weird.
Illuminati
because,
confirmed, right?
Yeah. Well, because on the back of most U.S. currency, or bills anyway, they have American monuments or other buildings. They have the White House, they have the Lincoln Monument, they have the Capitol, that kind of thing.
They have like Montana or Michigan.
Well, those are the coins, yeah. But, you know,
well,
that's
you said currency.
Right. But mostly it's buildings and other things like that. But then we have this weird design on the back, right? Well, that is more about old symbolism that has nothing to do really with the Masons, or that the Masons adopted it after that symbol was adopted. So the seal of the United States, which is what that image is based on, with the pyramid and the all-seeing eye, was adopted as the part of the seal of the United States in 1782. But the Freemasons didn't start to use that symbol until 1797.
Gasp.
So 15 years later. So why is that a Freemason thing again?
Because they did it.
It's more of the Freemasons adopting an American thing than the other way around.
Well, it's like when a band does a cover song without giving, like Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
Like that's the 9 Inch Nails song, but everyone thinks it's his. Or, yeah, because that got bigger.
Right. Wait, is that the Hurt song?
Yeah.
Yes. I knew something about music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
9 Inch Nails originally performed that.
Oh, okay. Okay. See, I'm proud of myself for knowing that.
Yeah, I'm really proud of you, too.
I know. You should be very proud of myself.
You didn't recognize Blink-182, but you recognized that.
Yeah,
so
I did.
I'll give you props.
Yeah. But, again, why do people make this connection of the pyramids and the Masons, and why are people worried about the Masons and da-da-da-da-da? Well, for a good part of early part of American history, I don't say no one cared about the Masons, but there wasn't this conspiracy negative image that the Masons have or had. Most of the major American founders were Masons. And why wouldn't you be? It was a club movement. It was sort of like a social thing. It wasn't like this evil turning the world kind of a thing. But how they got this negative image was sort of was based on a murder mystery, essentially.
Okay. I like murders and mysteries.
So in the 1820s, there was what was called the Morgan Affair. Basically, there was this guy who claimed to have been a Mason applicant or member, and then he either left or got thrown out, depending on who you ask.
What if I asked you?
Well, we don't know. It's just one story or the other. And he basically threatened to publish a expose on the Masons and the evil things they were doing. And like he got a book publisher behind him and all these other things. And then he disappeared. Right. And essentially this body washed ashore, and some people say it was him. Other people say it was a Canadian guy because this was in the Great Lakes. And basically it became this, almost like, do you remember, you're a little too young, but JonBenet Ramsey or the O.J. Simpson trial?
Oh, I know OJ.
Okay.
That is my favorite car chase.
Okay. Oh, jeez. Well, it kind of became one of those things, like in the newspapers in America at the time. It became this scandal. Like, where is this? Where is Mr. Morgan? What did the Masons do? Blah, blah, blah. And of course, the problem was a lot of prominent citizens, especially the northeastern part of the country at the time, were members of the Freemasons. So like a lot of times the local sheriff would be a Freemason, right? So, the sheriff is covering up, what happened to him, or they aren't investigating what happened to Mr. Morgan, or
it's a conspiracy.
It's a conspiracy, or the judge is a Mason, so they're going to do this, and the Masons were silencing him, and da-da-da-da-da. And let's pretend that all of that is true. Let's pretend for a moment that the Masons did kill him in order to silence them about the organization. That does not prove that the Masons are controlling the world and built the pyramids and did all this, right?
Yes, it does.
No, it just means that some Masons killed a guy, but also we don't even know if they did kill that guy.
They did.
Maybe.
They did.
This is a side story, but it's kind of crazy. This became so significant that the Freemasons were the first third party in American history. There actually was a political party called the Anti-Masonic Political Party. So
I did not know that.
Yeah, and they actually got electoral votes. Not very many, but they
got them.
But they did get them. Yeah. So
this is an accomplishment within itself for a small party.
Oh, it is. So that's kind of a tangential thing. Now let's move on to the Sphinx before we talk about the aliens.
I love the aliens.
Yeah. So the Sphinx is kind of a mystery for multiple reasons. One, we're not 100% sure who it's built for. So, for instance, a lot of the pyramids weren't originally labeled, and that sounds kind of funny.
So, like, they didn't tell you who was in them.
Yeah, and some of them did, but not all of them. And actually, this is kind of funny. Ancient Egyptian archaeologists. So these are archaeologists that were alive during the period of ancient Egypt. So these aren't modern people who study ancient Egypt. These were ancient Egyptians themselves that were studying their own ancient history. Went around and collected stories, or went through lore, or pharaonic records. And they put labels on some of the monuments and some of the pyramids, so we kind of can have a good guess of who they were built for.
So they weren't
why.
built labeled. Some guys went and labeled them later.
Some of them were.
Okay.
Some of them were, but some of them weren't.
And so then the guys labeled the ones they could figure out of the ones that... Okay.
Right. And now, of course, you can't necessarily 100% trust those later labels, but of course, it's a really good hint, right?
Yeah.
It's a good starting point, and you just sort of have to kind of take it at their word in many ways.
Got to start somewhere.
Right. You got to start somewhere. But anyway, the scholarly consensus in general is that the Sphinx is modeled after, or was built by... well, carved by, because it wasn't built. King Khafre, so Pharaoh Khafre, who was the builder of the second Great Pyramid at Giza.
Okay.
So it's not the tallest one, it's the slightly shorter one.
Nothing wrong with silver.
No, nothing wrong with silver. And he was the son of Khufu, who was the builder of the Great Pyramid.
Okay.
So he was the successor.
Sounds great.
And one of the reasons why they think that is because it's sort of oriented with his pyramid. And because like a lot of ancient monuments, what we have is only a small part usually of what the whole thing was. Mm-hmm. And a lot of Egyptian temples or monumental structures were like a big complex. Almost think of the mall in Washington, D.C., that whole giant spot.
National Mall.
The National Mall, okay. Yes. There's Lincoln's Memorial, and then there's the reflecting pool, and the Washington Monument, and the Capitol Building, and the World War II Memorial, and then the Smithsonian buildings along the side. There's that whole space is kind of one thing, but of course it's made of multiple components, right? So a lot of the pyramids had a whole pyramid complex of different temples and other smaller structures and different things. Anyway, so the Sphinx is sort of oriented that way towards Khafre's pyramid and its complex. The other reason, and this is not necessarily what we'd call historical context, but based on the rock itself. So a lot of the stone structures that were added to the Sphinx and the Sphinx structure around it, because there's like walls and other bits, the fossils that are in the limestone match many of the same blocks that were used to build Khafre's pyramid. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like if you were looking at an old house or like remnants of an old house, and the kitchen had the same tile as the bathroom, you would go, oh, well, they were built around the same time.
Yeah.
Or they were renovated that house at the same time, right? Because it matches. Well, same thing. That kind of evidence says, well, they were quarried from the same area, these limestone blocks. So it kind of makes sense they were built around the same time.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we also know that the Sphinx was repaired. Tutmosis, who was a very successful pyramid pharaoh in the New Kingdom, so this is thousands of years later than when the Sphinx was carved, he repaired it. Supposedly, he had a dream before he became pharaoh that while he was napping up against the Sphinx, and at this time, the Sphinx was mostly buried in sand. And he had a dream where the Sphinx says, you know, if you restore me to my former glory, one day you will become king.
Look what happened.
Look what happened. So Tutmosis, who at the time was, you know, in the royal family, but he wasn't next in line, he started a building project. He was kind of one of those guys that went around labeling things, like he was one of those restorers.
He's a labeler.
He's a labeler. And he supposedly dug out the Sphinx and did some repair work to it. And then, lo and behold, several years later, he became pharaoh. And he actually basically put a monument, like a little stone, like a what we almost call like a museum plaque next to the Sphinx, and said, I, Tutmosis, restored the Sphinx. I am awesome.
You gotta toot your own horn a little bit
Right.
once in a while.
And that when when you're come from a society that builds giant monuments to people, you tend to brag a lot.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's one part. But then a lot of the, I would say the big conspiracy that surrounds the Sphinx is that it was built by a society before the Egyptians.
Was it?
No. So
How do you know that?
Well, again, we go back to that Occam's razor thing is the simplest explanation. So the evidence that people put forward about the Sphinx being built, and even some people say this about pyramids and other things, that the ancient Egyptians didn't build them, was there appears to be rain erosion on the Sphinx. Now, today, and even back then, rain being a fairly dry country other than the Nile Valley, it doesn't rain a lot there, right? You know,
Yeah.
this isn't Seattle. You know, Egypt is as far away from Seattle climatically as, almost possible.
Yeah.
And so basically what they're saying is if there is rain damage on the Sphinx, then that means that the structure was carved, because it's actually not completely built. It's picture like the Giza Plateau, which is where the monuments were built. Because you have to build a pyramid on a big flat area, right? You have to clear and flatten the area.
So I can't build a big wide structure on half of a hill and half not.
No, it's kind of fall down a little bit.
Is that how gravity works?
That's part of it, yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, the Sphinx is made out of a harder stone than the rest of it. So picture like if you were carving into rock, or like if you were digging a trench in your backyard and you came across, like let's say you were building like a downspout that goes in your backyard, and you hit some really hard rock rather than softer soil or clay. Well, you can either work a lot harder and dig it, or just divert yourself a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. Well, most people would divert yourself. So the Sphinx area was a lot denser and a lot harder rock. So what they had to do is just sort of carving the Sphinx area into the statue and then adding stone to it to make the shape that we see today.
Okay.
But anyway, it does have this what appears to be rain damage on, and they thought, well, Egypt, the last sort of wet period where there would be heavier rains was, thousands of years before, a couple thousand years before the ancient Egyptians were there, right? Or what we would call ancient Egyptian civilization was there. And that sounds pretty good. But one, we don't have any evidence of a highly organized, sophisticated ancient Egyptian-like society that predates the ancient Egyptians.
I feel like we would have found it if it was there.
Right. I mean, yes, the Mesopotamians and the Sumerians, but they were only slightly before, and that they were relatively far away at that time.
Yeah, they weren't in Egypt, were they?
No. So, like, And Sumeria, Mesopotamia are the oldest settled advanced human society. And that's the only ones we have evidence for, and nothing predates that. So one, we don't have any other evidence. Number two, they've done recent studies on the Sphinx and then also dating ancient climate. And it turns out that it probably was a little wetter than we originally thought when the Sphinx was being constructed / carved. So there was more rain than we initially suspected.
So it was totally possible that there was just rain erosion, right?
That's part of it. But then the other part is different kinds of rock react different ways to oxidization and to rainfall and wind erosion, right? Mm-hmm. Well, basically the limestone that makes up the Sphinx and other monuments in Egypt, or parts of it, can have a lot of high salt content. And basically the idea is that these rains dissolved the salt deposits in the limestone, and then they would recrystallize at the surface and then would erode and crumble away. And so that would make it appear as if it is eroding by much more rain, faster and harder than it normally would have. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So sort of like the makeup of the rock made it erode faster.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Like picture like if let's say you have two different cars that were made around the same time, but one car wasn't painted properly, so it would rust faster. Mm-hmm. Well, one car is going to look older after a couple years than the other one, right?
Yeah, even though it's built at the same time.
Built at the same time, but because it's done a little differently, made by the rock is a little different, it's going to be affected differently.
I think that makes the utmost sense.
It does. And then we're going to go to the alien thing.
Yes.
Now, what have you heard about, why would aliens build the pyramids? What have you heard, or could you guess?
To mess with us.
Okay, that's one. Can you think of another one?
Communication, so they can spy on us.
Okay.
They wanted to give us a gift.
I
I know nothing about it. I'm just spitballing.
Okay,
right now.
other ones they were landing zones.
Okay, or they could be like bases of communication for their homeworld.
Right, or other different things like that, right? Well, okay, let's break those ideas down without any information. So let's just break it down logically, right? We're not doing any investigation. We're just using some thought experiments. If a society is advanced enough to build spacecraft that can travel to another planet and come back, we assume. This isn't like this isn't like our spacecraft that we're talking about that are relatively crude, right? People are picturing spacecraft that can bring people to another habited planet and interact with it for years or, decades or whoever for a long period of time, right? Why would they need us to do anything?
Because they want to stay hidden.
Why?
Because they don't want us to know they're there.
But why?
I don't know. I'm not an alien.
No, I know. But the point is, if you had such advanced technology, you wouldn't need...
Maybe they just wanted to observe us to see what they would, to see what we would do. And if we were there, if they were there, we would mess with their observation. That would mess with their observation because they want just us day to day.
Then why would you build the tallest structure that humans had ever built as a giant here we are?
To make them feel good about themselves.
By building a incredibly dangerous and backbreaking object that will be there for thousands of years.
Conspiracy, man.
I know. This is the point. Is like, the famous phrase is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Okay, but what if the reptilians came from the hollow earth to build it? Because reptilians do disguise themselves as people. George Bush is allegedly a reptilian.
Oh, I'm sure he is. But again, why would you need that?
Because it's cool.
Okay, if we went back in time to, Neolithic societies, right? Why would we need anything from them? We wouldn't, right? Because
we don't know that, though.
But what would we need from them?
We don't know. We don't know what they have and don't have.
I mean, they have bear skins and knives and...
What if they have some dope-ass knives?
Okay, but you have future knives that are better.
It's the vibes, though.
No, you just wouldn't need them because they would be because the aliens that supposedly built the pyramids would be far more advanced than we are today. So they wouldn't have anything in common with them. They wouldn't need anything from them. It just doesn't make any sense.
I still like the idea that they built it as like a communications relay to whoever their hometown is, or their hometown.
So a giant limestone structure with no technology in it whatsoever.
It can't stick out, or else they're gonna blow their cover, right?
Okay.
We want to observe. They want to observe us for what we are and what we do.
So why wouldn't you just stay in your flying ship or build it underneath like a tunnel or a mound where it wouldn't be this giant stone structure that everyone can see?
The crust of the earth is hollow, so there's nothing to put underground.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, they only got 12 kilometers to work with before we get hollow.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's a future podcast episode.
Right.
So the earth is hollow. They can only go to assuming the earth is hollow.
Uh-huh.
I know I'm a crazy person, but let's roll with it. Let's roll with it. Just for the sake of my craziness, let's roll with it.
Okay, fine.
They only have 12 kilometers to work with, allegedly. They couldn't get deep enough in there.
Why?
12 kilometers.
But why would you need to be deep?
I don't know. I'm not an alien.
If you were trying to hide yourself from ancient humans, you wouldn't need to be very deep.
But what if they started digging? We don't want to have like a super sophisticated thing. So they built a communications relay that made them think they did it so they could get a sense of accomplishment. And so we could get a good communications relay to send to Planet Fitness or whatever. I don't know.
Planet Fitness.
And
so it's a whole conspiracy with the workout movement.
Yeah, they had so much like information they couldn't pass it through the ship's communications. They had to build something bigger to get everything over there.
That seems like way too complicated. Going back to Occam's razor.
Yeah, I'm totally just making this up as I go.
I know. And the other thing is like this is connected to it. People will say it can't be explained. Well, why not? And yes, there are things about how ancient peoples did things before modern technology, but that's just because we don't need to use those techniques anymore. So we don't pass them on anymore. They get lost, right? For instance, there are archaeologists that have learned how to make Clovis spear points, and Clovis spear points are a style of spearhead technology that was used in the Americas, thousands of years ago. Well, we learned how to do that, right? But for thousands of years, no one was making those spear points the same way, but people figured it out. They reverse engineered it, right? Mm-hmm. So just because a technology or a method was lost doesn't mean that we can't learn it again, and doesn't make it that aliens invented Clovis points either.
What if they did?
They didn't.
What if it was the reptilians?
Probably not.
They just crawled out from the hole in Antarctica. Duh.
Well, then you go visit them.
I would, but they don't put airplanes over that hole, so...
Another example of this, there's a lot of things that the Egyptians didn't write down. So one of the examples is, the Egyptians never gave us the architectural plans of how they built the pyramids. Well, there's also no guidebook of how people made mummies.
Yeah, they just didn't log some stuff.
No, and there's actually a really good logical reason why they wouldn't, right? Think of people who own funeral homes, in today's society.
Yeah.
Almost always it's passed from family to family, right? From generation to generation, that business.
Yeah, you don't see many upstart funeral homes.
No. And this is probably the same thing here and also, again, remember, only a small percentage of the population was literate anyway. The literate class wasn't making mummies. So
they had the people who were illiterate just doing all the grunt work.
Right. So that doesn't mean that because we don't have a guidebook of how to make an Egyptian-style mummy doesn't mean that aliens did it. It just means that they didn't write it down.
Or that aliens did it. And they're really good at hiding their tracks. See, they're so good at hiding their tracks. We can't even comprehend why they're doing what they do.
Yeah. And then going to the pyramid thing, also, architects is the job of an architect is a very old job. It's one of the first hunter-gatherer farmer priest jobs. And there probably weren't very many of them. We actually have some of their names because prominent royal architects, we have found their tombs and things like that.
Yeah.
Oh, and this is another thing. We actually know who was the architect of the first Egyptian pyramid. His name was Imhotep. And you've probably heard that name. If you've ever watched the Brendan Fraser mummy movies.
Nope.
Never have. Okay.
I do not enjoy Brendan Fraser.
Okay. Well, the name of the Egyptian mummy in that movie is Imhotep. Now, he's not supposed to be the same guy, that historical
Why would
figure.
they pick the same name?
Because it sounds cool and because it's a real ancient Egyptian name. But we actually... Mitchell made a funny noise. So I had to smile.
I am fidgeting with my phone case right now.
Yeah, it's a great noise.
I apologize to anyone who just had to listen to that.
Anyway, so we actually have we actually know the architect of the very first pyramid. So again, why do we need aliens to build them in the first place? And
because people want to believe in aliens.
They want to believe in aliens. And there's a couple.
It is ignorant to think that we're the only intelligent life out there.
Oh, though. I don't contest that there is life out in the universe, but I would just say that there is zero evidence that they have ever landed here.
Roswell.
Yeah. No.
Okay. We have to assume the government's keeping secrets from us.
Do we?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's not like they're gonna start mass panic finding aliens.
Meh.
I don't think the government's 100% truthful with everything.
Well, no, not
okay.
everything.
The JFK files have been classified until just now. There is information that we don't know. Mm-hmm. I think it's a safe assumption that if there was alien contact, they'd want to keep it on the DL.
I don't doubt that.
We'll talk about Roswell.
We'll talk about that later.
That's a whole nother fish to fry. And
it is.
I would like to fry that fish.
It is. But one thing that I think leads to a lot of these conspiracy theories or doubts about, especially the Egyptian monuments, but other things too, but primarily Egyptians, is that modern people look at these things and they look at it from a modern perspective. A modern person looks at something like a giant stone structure built for the basically glory of one person, and that doesn't make sense to them, right? Yeah. We don't do that. We don't even,
Okay. We do that.
Do we?
Have you seen there's a big tower in Chicago, tallest building in Chicago right now, big and blue. Mm-hmm. There's a certain last name on it.
Is there?
Yeah. Uh-huh. There's also one in New York.
Uh-huh.
So, most people don't make big monuments for themselves.
Yeah.
It's still happening.
But notice that most of those cases it's just naming a building.
That's true.
Like, for instance, when I look at the Sears Tower or the John Hancock building or anything like that, I don't care who it's named after, right? And I'm not thinking about
Well, it's actually not named after Sears anymore,
well,
too.
I know that. But you see my point. I don't look at those buildings and think, wow, the guy that paid for that building is the bestest guy ever.
I freaking love Sears.
Yeah, I mean, we barely kind of tolerate that for our own political leaders in our time. I mean, think of how many U.S. presidents, for instance, have a significant public monument that's known by most of the public. A handful.
Yeah, like some of the original ones.
Right.
I think Roosevelt's the most modern one.
Right. And most of those, actually all of them, were built decades or centuries after those people had died.
Yeah.
We're not doing it while they're in office. And in fact, in most republics, the sort of general rule is you don't put a living person on something that is monumental. Like the post office has rarely ever put a living person on a stamp.
Yeah, or like the coins with they did dollar coin series with the dead president's wives on there. But they stopped at Reagan.
Right.
Because everyone after Reagan's kind of
alive. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Pretty much. So we don't do that. So looking at building this, giant wasteful structure for just a giant tomb for a dead leader doesn't make sense to us.
Well, North Korea.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just gonna throw that out there. There's so many Kim Jong Il Un. I don't remember the Rocket Man. Like if you go there, there's just all him and his dad statues.
Right. But how do we view that?
Bad.
Yeah, we view that as batshit crazy, right? We view that as a sign of insanity and a society being dysfunctional rather than functional.
That's very true.
But through most of human history, having basically sacrificing yourself or most of the good of society for one or two people was deemed normal and not something strange. Like we view things as like, okay, for vast majority of human history, all of resources, the society's resources, were being funneled into things like the army, monumental architecture, and religion, and then a little bit for irrigation, right? Basically, nothing else got what we would call like government money or outside money, right?
Yeah.
But now that's basically mostly what we argue about. I mean, we still argue about money being funneled into the military or this or that, but we don't spend. I mean, think of like the modern equivalent is if we spent like a third of the U.S. budget on the White House, right?
Well, I can think of someone who would be totally fine with that.
But you get my point, right?
Yeah.
We're not doing that, and we have never done that, and it would never even enter our minds to do that.
There is literally no reason to do that.
Right. And then the other thing is we are also live in a world where we assume that things should be safe and that you use as least manpower as possible.
Yes, we do.
Right. But in ancient societies, and even up until very recently, things were done without any regard to safety or the labor
laws are a relatively new concept.
Basically within the 20th century.
And then there's still places outside of America that just does not give a fudge.
Yeah, I mean, we have cared for the last several decades about things like sweatshops and things like that. But again, for 99% of human history, no one gave a hoot.
That some people still don't even care.
Right.
Because like half the new iPhone that just came out that was made by 10-year-old interns in China.
Exactly. But again, the levels of worker safety or rights, or whatever we want to think about, that we deem as barbaric now would be deemed luxurious and extravagant by basically every other human standard throughout most of human history.
Very true.
And we also tend to think things of projects should be only taking a year or two. We don't think of things taking decades, right? So most of these pyramids took a decade or so to build, and they were using thousands of people to do it at a time.
Yeah.
And they were conscripted people. So kind of like the army, but they were, like in the army, paid. Basically, you have a giant country, ancient Egypt, full of mostly farmers, right? Well, think of how farmers work, right? There's about 2/3 of the year they work really hard to either get the land ready and then to harvest the land, right?
Yes, sir.
And then they have about 1/3 of their time where they're just sort of living off of that bounty, and they do minor things, right? Well, what do you do when most of your country's labor force kind of has nothing to do for a couple months? You send them off to build temples, build pyramids, build irrigation ditches.
I was going to say drink.
Serve in the army, all these other things. So that's what these people were doing, but we don't think like that anymore. And so we're seeing these things that were built for certain purposes and in ways that modern humans would never consider if they weren't confronted with that as is, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a big problem. But now we're going to put what I consider to be the final nail in the humans didn't build that coffin of, anyway, I'm going to put the final nail, what I consider to be the best evidence.
But the aliens did it, so
right.
Your evidence is wrong.
And that would be, if you could take the architecture of the pyramids and put it in biological evolutionary terms, we have transitional forms that lead up to the pyramids, okay? So in the pre-dynastic period, so before ancient Egypt was united into one country, and then even through large parts of ancient Egyptian history, Egyptian pharaohs or local kings or warlords or, the nobles the higher up in society would build tombs for themselves in what we call mastabas. And it's an Arabic word meaning bench.
Okay.
And the ancient Egyptians didn't call them mastabas, but
That's what we call
yeah,
them.
modern Egyptians call them mastabas. And I am showing Mitchell a picture of a mastaba right now.
While knocking his microphone into space.
Yeah, almost doing that.
Mark will post these pictures onto our podcast page, facebook.com/Mathom House Podcast.
Yeah.
Because y'all probably want to see these too.
Yeah. And if you look at it, what it is,
Okay.
this is made out of mud brick. And what mud brick is, basically you take some mud and then you put it in a like a mold, like a bread mold.
Yeah, for those listening who don't want to look it up, it kind of looks like a big loaf of bread.
Yeah.
But long and made of wood.
And so you take, it's made out of mud brick. And
Well, did I say wood?
yeah.
Why did I say
Yeah,
wood?
Egypt has like no wood.
Well, I know that.
And then you put clay and mud in it, the mud brick, and then you bake it. And so it becomes like a little brick.
Yeah.
So it's not made out of stone, it's made out of mud and straw. Anyway, so you basically form this like long rectangular structure that's a little high, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a mastaba. And we found bodies buried beneath them, right? Very fancy.
We did?
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, we have. Okay, so then remember I told you that we have the architect for the first pyramid, Imhotep? We know that guy?
Yes, we do.
Well, this is the first pyramid. It's called the step pyramid because it looks like a step. So this is a picture of, I'm showing Mitchell now, of the step pyramid. And if you look at it, what does it look like?
A cinnamon roll.
Well, kind of. But what...
So it's like a bunch of layers of the what?
Mastabas.
Yeah, it's just stacked up on top of each other.
Right. And so think of your Imhotep and you're the architect and you're trying to impress your boss.
It kind of looks like if you took a cinnamon roll, you pulled it up and all the layers didn't fall apart.
Yeah. And it's like layers going up, kind of like if you built like a Lego structure.
Yeah.
So
It almost looks like a precursor to like the Aztec pyramids with
it's kind of looks like it's built more in that vein, right?
Yeah.
But so think of this in really personal human terms. You are Imhotep, hired by the pharaoh, your king, who's a god. You have to remember this, is a god. And he has 100% power over your life, whether, he's going to allow you to continue to live and basically make your life and of your family better or worse, right? So he's hired you to build his mastaba temple, his mastaba tomb. So, but think of like all the, the toadies that try to serve their master in any movie, like a henchman for, kind of Bond movie or something.
the Bowser kids.
Right. They want to impress their boss so they get promoted or they get more rewards or presents, right?
Yeah.
So now you're Imhotep and you go, if I told the boss that I could build him 2 mastabas on top of each other,
Or 5 in this
or
instance.
5 or 6, and it just keeps getting better and better, right?
Yeah.
So making it better and making it cooler
it's
so
more
you
of
get
a-
more rewards,
Yeah, more
right?
but better.
Right. So they did that. And then they built a couple of these over a short period of time.
Okay.
And then they thought, well, let's make it look really impressive and smooth it out. So then they built this guy. And this is a pyramid, but you'll kind of notice that it's like a very flat structure, like a tower with a couple layers that go up.
For those listening at home that cannot see this picture unless you are looking it up, it's like a hill with a taller square on top with a smaller square on top of it.
Right. And you also notice that it's surrounded by a giant like rubble heap.
Yes, it is.
That is because they tried to make a smooth pyramid and it collapsed.
Oh, okay. So that's what that hill is.
Right. So you have the inner structure here that survived and the rest of it just went, it didn't quite work. So fall down.
So those are like the innards of the pyramid.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. And this one was built by Snefru. And then, this is the coolest part. So this guy, Snefru, decided we're going to build a smooth pyramid. Didn't work.
Darn.
So then they said, we'll try again. And then they built this one, which is called the bent pyramid. And Mitchell, what do you notice about it?
It's a pyramid.
Yeah, but
There's layers.
Yeah, but remember, a lot of this because the outer layer kind of fell off a little bit.
What do you want me to notice about this?
Well, if you start at the bottom, how it starts off going up at one angle, and then at one point...
It is not, for those at home, this is not a consistent pyramid. It kind of goes up at an angle, like really steep, and then after maybe 50 feet, it gets a little less steep. And then it's, I don't know, kind of... I don't know what it looks. It looks like a pyramid. That's kind. It looks like if a kid tried to draw a pyramid.
Yeah, like, and what basically, so Snefru built this one too. So the first one collapsed, then they built this one. So what they were trying to do, they tried to build this really tall, big pyramid with this, tall angle, and then they realized there were structural problems. But they kind of didn't want it because remember, you're building this for your tomb, and you want it to have it completed before you're dead. So sort of as an insurance policy, they finished it, but they finished it where it was kind of wrong because they had to change the angle of it in order to make it stable, right?
Yeah.
So this is the bent pyramid. Then they built this guy, the third pyramid built by Snefru, which is called the red pyramid because the rocks kind of have a reddish sort of rusty look to it.
For those listening at home, it's a pyramid.
Yes.
There's not anything flashy about. If you think pyramid, this is what you would see.
Exactly. And then the next slide is the pyramids at Giza, right? So it's the three big ones that everyone knows, and then the three smaller ones that were built for queens and wives and other members of the royal family.
Or to communicate with aliens, depending on who you ask.
And anyway, the reason I bring these up and show these pictures is that we see a progression, a logical progression of people learning how to build a pyramid, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's a little accidental because you start with the mastaba, which is made of mud brick. Oh, and by the way, the built pyramid,
You stack up the mastabas.
right? Stacked up mastabas with the step pyramid, which by the way is the first building with an interior structure built in stone in human history.
Wow.
And then you try to smooth it out, and it didn't work. They didn't quite know how to do the non-step pyramid. It collapsed. And then they try again. They're more successful. Doesn't completely collapse, but they didn't quite get the shape right. And then, boom, red pyramid on their fifth or sixth try. They got it.
Yep. So we will be posting those on Facebook. So if you want to listen to this whole thing again with Mark's riveting commentary,
No,
feel free.
I don't. I think once you see it, I mean,
that was not sarcasm. It actually does make more sense with the pictures.
Right,
So
I mean-
I strongly do encourage people to look at the pictures.
right. I mean, okay,
Actually, if you could send me the links, I'll just put them in the doobly-doo on this video.
okay. Remember back in grade school, you're really little, like kindergarten, first grade, and you would get those little images, and you're supposed to color them, and then the teacher would say, cut them out and put them in order.
Sure.
Right. And it was supposed to teach you how to interpret images and put them in order. Like sometimes you would see like an egg, and then you would see a crack in the egg, and then you'd see a chick coming out of the egg, and then you'd see a chick, and then you'd see a chicken, right?
Okay, well that opens up a whole different philosophy.
Well, I know.
Does the chicken come before the egg?
Well, yeah. But then the images would be mixed up in different orders, and the kid was supposed to put them in order, right?
Yes, sir.
I think if you gave these pictures to someone and you said, put them in order that makes sense to you, they would do exactly in the order that they are, right?
Yeah,
and
it makes complete logical sense.
right. And someone would say, oh, well, they started off with this, and these are the intermediate steps of how they learned how to do this, and then this is the supposedly final step of how they got there. I think it's one of those things that if you come at it from, I won't say an uninformed, but from one perspective,
From someone like me who's not aware of it because I've just not looked at anything up about it.
well, yeah, and you'll just see it from a certain point of view. But if you sort of look at the evidence and the history of these things and the order of these things, it makes sense, and there is a logic to it. You just have to, again, you have to find it. And you have to know these things.
Or what if the aliens gave them the power to make it? Because the aliens were watching us and they're like, okay, let's help them out.
By building giant useless structures that are only useful as sort of
Well, maybe
buildings
the aliens
for
found it, then they're
things.
like, oh, damn, we might be able to use this. Let's help them out a little.
Sure, yeah. Oh, and one like sort of minor topic before we close. A lot of people don't know this or don't think about it too much, but the main pyramid age was mostly just, as I said, in the New Kingdom. And I'm sorry, the Old Kingdom. And then when the Old Kingdom collapsed, it went through what is called an intermediate period. And in Egyptian studies, that means when the country was fragmented and not united. The example that maybe more modern people would be familiar with would be like after the Western Roman Empire fell, we had the Dark Ages, where there's a bunch of kings fighting and like learning and technology declined a little bit and the economy collapsed.
It got dark.
It got dark. The Egyptians would call that like an intermediate period. That's what you would say, right? Well, basically what happened is a lot of the Egyptian tombs were robbed during intermediate periods.
Which makes sense.
Right. So because during, good times, which was for a large part of it, there would be guards and priests and civil servants in these and around these areas protecting them, right?
Yeah.
So, they weren't robbed then. But anyway, so pharaohs and other, civil servants and priests and things like that went into these temples and realized, hey, the pyramids, which are giant and everyone can see them from everywhere, and people knew there was a dead rich guy inside, they got robbed, and their resting, state for the rest of eternity got disturbed. Well, that's why they stopped building the pyramids, is because they were giant advertisements saying, rob me, please, when the police aren't looking.
It's like, hey, we got some good stuff here. Have fun.
Right. And so that's where you get the Valley of the Kings during the New Kingdom, and that's where King Tut's tomb was. Mm-hmm. It was literally in the middle of nowhere, and it was at the end of sort of like a canyon kind of thing. And so it was much less known, and people were less likely to find it. Now, of course, again, during another intermediate period, most of those got robbed too. But the point is, they didn't stop building the pyramids because the aliens stopped telling them to. They built it for very practical. They stopped building them for very practical purposes. A, because they were very expensive and time consuming, and B, because they weren't protecting the king and his body.
Yeah.
So it didn't make sense to build them anymore.
Yeah, it's just saying, yo, we got a bunch of cool shit here. You want some stuff? I got it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically the end of that subject. But I want to close with a very cool quote that I found online, and I forgot to write down who wrote it.
How could you?
I know.
Mark, plagiarism.
I know. I feel very well. I'm attributing whoever wrote it.
Podcasterism.
But this is sort of relates to what we've been talking about. And here's the quote. There is nothing dull about a life without fairies, Easter bunnies, devils, ghosts, magic crystals, etc. Life is only boring to boring people.
JFK and Gandhi.
And, the point is, people are looking for fantastical explanations to things that are already amazing. The fact that ancient peoples, without the use of cranes and steam power and helicopters and even winches and pulleys and large domesticated animals in
or
ancient
aliens,
Egypt, right, or aliens, built these really impressive structures. And instead of focusing on what really is amazing, they're focusing on this stupid amazing stuff. Yeah. So
I think
life is only boring to boring people.
Well, stupidity is also very objective.
Well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I'm just saying your definition of stupid is much different than my definition of stupid.
Maybe.
Aliens exist. Blink-182 wrote a song about it, so that means it has to be true. So, pop punk describes life. And if Tom DeLonge says there's aliens, actually, I'm not going to believe that he says there's aliens. Because he's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. That was our podcast.
So that concludes episode 3.
Yes.
And Mitchell, tell them what your subject will be for episode 4.
Super Mario Odyssey.
Ooh. I play that game.
So do I. So we're just going to do the Mitchell and Mark review segment, and we're going to review it.
Sounds good.
What's Mark going to talk about?
I'm going to talk about the greatest human in all of human history.
Gandalf.
A, not human. True. And B, not real.
He's real to me.
Well, he's real. He's all in our hearts.
Yeah, he's real in your heart.
Right. No, we're going to talk about the actual greatest human in all human history, John Quincy Adams.
Your email. So my mom is in the kitchen right now. We're at my dining room table. the face she gave when you said JQA.
I know, but I'm going to be able to convince you, I think, that he is the greatest human being of all time.
I mean, your email address says so.
It does.
And so does your PlayStation.
Yeah, it does. It does.
All right, I'm going to disagree with that. He's the greatest human being of all time, but we'll talk about it.
I'll make my case.
So don't forget to hit subscribe. Shoot us an email. Tell us we're awesome. Tell us we're not awesome. Give us some topics. Maybe even say hi. I might say hi back. By might, I mean I will.
He definitely will.
Oh, I'll totally wave at you too. All right, well, y'all have a good day.
Goodbye, everybody.
Sound good, guys.